Alright then, hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of Playing Like Pulis. Now, I know the last episode was pretty long, but obviously we kind of made a tactic and a half in that entire episode, as well as discussed a lot of important elements. So I do kind of promise that going forwards, you're not going to end up with 40-minute episodes. It will kind of go back to the norm, as in 15 to 20 minute episodes. What I promised at the end of episode 2 was that the next episode will be us trying to recreate Pulis-esque, Pulis-style set pieces, which were of course such a key element to his game at Stoke and still are at West Brom, even though they're not doing too well this season. And we're also going to, because obviously I've disabled the first transfer window, we're not going to really be able to make any signings. So we're going to look at the tactic we made in the last episode and how exactly and who we're going to fit into it and where. Now again, I've not really had any time at all to play much Football Manager 2018. And all weekend after recording episode 2, I was away in London working. So I'm literally recording this on Monday the 6th of November, and I've still not really played any Football Manager 2018 properly. So this isn't something that's tried and tested in terms of the set piece, so don't go off and try and use it yourself and complain it doesn't work. It's just like the initial tactic, a recreation, and throughout this season we're going to constantly tweak until we feel like we've really got it right. As far as Pulis' set pieces are concerned as well, obviously there was a lot of variation to Pulis' set pieces, and for me that's kind of an issue with Football Manager, where unfortunately I still feel like the game hasn't really evolved yet. I feel like you should have more than one corner tactic or more than one throw-in tactic that your players, depending on what they feel like, kind of alternate between, because in real life, if teams set up the same way every game or every time they get a corner throughout a game the same way, the opposition will have you sussed out. Unfortunately, this is Football Manager, so it doesn't quite work like that. So instead, what we're going to do is try to recreate a Pulis-esque, a style of corner, and we'll take a look at it now. So first few points, kind of obvious: goalkeeper and 2 fullbacks to stay back. Now the only reason why I've chosen for both of our fullbacks to stay back, which may not have been something Pulis may have done at Stoke, if you look at Pulis teams, most players tend to be over 6 foot, right? So Pulis teams in general, one of the main reasons why they are ridiculously threatening from set pieces is because of their sheer size. But in our case, Brighton don't really have the biggest of fullbacks, and even though we're probably going to be playing with relatively defensive fullbacks to try and mimic Pulis' fullbacks at Stoke, it kind of makes sense not to send our fullbacks forward. And it is, of course, important, in my opinion, in Football Manager, to have at least 2 players stay back when you are attacking from a corner, to ensure you don't get counter-attacked should you cross the ball into the box and the opposition keeper catches it. You don't want them to really try and break on you. So now, conceptually, what are the corners meant to be like? They're meant to be in-swinging. So for that reason, expect to have a right-footed corner taker for a left-hand side corner and a left-footed corner taker for a right-hand side corner. In this case, I've actually opted to tell the corner takers to aim the corners at the penalty spot. A lot of people might argue that near post could probably be a bit more of a Pulis-esque option, especially with how we're set up with our bigger target man striker attacking the near post. But I think just choosing the penalty spot right now, and historically in Football Manager, ever since they kind of ironed out the near post corner glitch, I've always found that aiming your corners at the near post always results in it being caught by the keeper. So for that reason, for me, the next best thing is a penalty spot. And as well, because it's not as specific, we'll probably end up with a little bit more variation on corners, which is really what we want. Now, I don't really want to go into too much detail as to why we'd prefer an in-swinging corner over an out-swinging corner. But to cut a long story short, an in-swinging corner means the ball is swinging towards the goal you're trying to score in. It's a lot more difficult for the defending team to try and clear, again, because the ball is swinging towards the goal you're trying to defend. If you have someone challenging the goalkeeper, he'll struggle to really try and punch it away. Again, part of that reasoning is because the ball is really curling towards the goal, so he has to second think it rather than if the ball was curling away from the goal. And because it's curling towards the goal, it means then that attacking players then have the momentum to run towards the ball, onto the ball. And because it's in-swinging and the ball is heading towards the goal and closer to the goal, it means that you basically need less power and strength to direct that ball towards the goal. Point is, an in-swinging corner, chances are the ball is getting closer to the danger area, within that penalty spot area where you kind of want the ball floating around, where it's very difficult to defend, where if you have big players going forwards, chances are they'll get something on it and manage to direct the ball at the goal. In terms of how we're going to kind of place our players around in the box, our right striker is our target man, so I've actually opted to send him towards a near post. Because penalty spot aimed crosses, depending on how good the corner is or not, there's still a big chance that the big guy attacking the near post, as well as the fact that he will draw defenders away from him, away from the goal, which is what you want. You want to vacate the area in front of the goal to make it easier for your attackers, or in your case defenders who are running to attack the ball, because you send your defenders forward. Make more room for them to be able to attack the ball and have less retaliation from the defensive team in their way, basically. So by placing our big target man at the front, not only do you draw defenders out towards him at the near post and away from protecting the goal, but also chances are if it's a poor corner, he might be able to maybe get a flick or two with his head or with his foot or something, and, you know, just give it that extra of an improved push towards the danger area where maybe, if you're lucky, someone can win the second ball and header it in at the back post, for example. In terms of sending someone short, I don't really feel like we need to send someone short. Sometimes people like sending a second man short towards the corner taker because it draws a defender out the box, but I feel like one of the strengths of Pulis style set pieces is how you flood the box, and you kind of know that a Pulis side isn't going to take a short corner anyways, so yeah, I'd rather send more people into the danger area, basically. I've got my defensive midfielder challenging the keeper. Now, that's a relatively intelligent choice, I think, versus my other big striker or my two centre-backs or my two wingers. Now, I don't want my other centre-back, or either of my two centre-backs, sorry, challenging the keeper, because even though they're big and strong and they could probably cause the keeper a lot of problems, they're probably not going to score if they're kind of focusing on trying to annoy the goalkeeper. Chances are the better headers and jumpers of a ball on your team, they're going to be your centre-back, so you want them in more of a loose role where they could potentially aim to try and score from, rather than worry about challenging the keeper. Again, second striker, due to this being a Pulis approach, is probably going to be pretty good and pretty big and pretty strong in the air as well. Wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea to have him challenge the keeper, but again, it might make more sense to have him in a looser role where he could potentially get in on the end of the corner and actually head home, or use his high finishing and composure stats to aim towards scoring rather than challenging the keeper. So the reason why I've gone with my defensive midfielder is because it's got to be either one of my two defensive midfielders, and it's up to you which one you choose. I'd suggest if you've got a ball winner, someone who is relatively physically strong and fit and okay in the air, but probably isn't that big of a player, so he's not going to be that much of a threat aerially, then I'd probably put him to try and challenge the goalkeeper, because he'll frustrate the goalkeeper. He's physically alright, even though he might not be as good as other options in the air, but because he's physically alright, he should still be a nuisance for the goalkeeper, which then means you can utilise your more corner-suited defensive midfielder as an extra player in the box to try and get in on the end of something. And again, the reason why I wouldn't probably choose one of my two wingers to challenge the goalkeeper is probably because wingers in general, especially in a tactic like this, where you want them to be pacey and fast, probably aren't going to be that good in the air. So yeah, you don't want the player challenging the goalkeeper to be too weak, otherwise the challenge will basically be irrelevant. You won't actually be annoying the opposition goalkeeper, which kind of defeats the point. Because don't forget as well, the better you can challenge a goalkeeper, the less likely he is to come out and punch the ball or try to catch it, right? Especially in the Premier League when you've got really good goalkeepers. So, next up, that's the striker at the near post dealt with. We've got the other striker. Now, my other striker is just set to get forward. Don't want to overcomplicate him as long as he's in the box somewhere doing his own thing. And again, another reason why I opted to give my striker a bit more of a looser role is because he's a striker, so naturally he's probably going to be able to find a bit of room in the box to shuffle around with and get in a good position, or he's going to be ready for a rebound of some sort. So I opted to give my striker a bit of a looser position. My slightly bigger defensive midfielder, or central midfielder in this case, has also been told to get forward, along with the opposite side midfielder. And the reason why I've opted to go with the opposite side midfielder is just because it allows you to get an extra man at the back post. But most importantly, I wouldn't want to set my left midfielder, given that this is a corner from the left side of the pitch, to be the guy at the back post. Because then, if the opposition are going to counter-attack or whatever, even if the goalkeeper catches the ball, he's then got more of a distance to run back to his side of the pitch. Like, it seems like a stupid reason, but I do genuinely believe that makes a difference in the long run in terms of knackering out your players. In terms of our left midfielder or left winger, lurking outside the area, for me, again, that makes sense. When you have a player lurking outside the area, chances are the opposition are probably going to want someone, if not on the edge of the box where he is, just in the box slightly off him to make sure he can't make a run in from deep and try and block him. Especially in our case when we have two players making runs from deep into the box with a lot of momentum behind them, a lot of speed. They can jump slightly higher as well because we're using an in-swinging corner. So again, by putting our left winger outside of the area, it means that potentially the opposition might have one less person in the box. Simple, but, you know, set pieces aren't rocket science. And I think that's pretty much everyone that I've covered, bar the two centre-backs. Now, as you can probably imagine, the two centre-backs are really going to be, along with the right striker, who's our target man, our two other main aerial threats. So, right centre-back is going to be attacking the far post. It makes sense. If it's a poor corner, happens to fly over everyone in the area, you kind of want a big guy who's aerially decent and strong at the back post. Now, obviously, him being at the back post will spread the opposition defence and someone will have to mark him, which makes more room for the target man and other striker towards the near post to do their thing, right? But generally speaking, if it's a poor corner and you have a big guy at the back, he might be able to head it back across goal if you're fortunate and he's good in the air and whatnot, which means if you can then win that second ball, you can maybe score a goal. But as well, if he's good enough, he might be able to even head in at the back post. So pretty obvious why he's there. Other centre-back, he's attacking the ball from deep. And this is something that Pulis sides were kind of notorious for at times. And that's really where we're going to be looking to try and utilise the in-swinging corner. So firstly, we end up with two people outside the area, which is going to force defenders to have to keep an eye on them at least, or send at least one or two people closer to them to try and stop them making runs into the box. Because they're making late runs into the box and they're a lot less static prior to the corner kick being taken, and once the corner kick is taken, they're on the move, they become very, very difficult to mark. Now, the centre-back is always the guy that's making the run from deep, going to be very, very good in the air. So chances are when the in-swinging corner comes in, if it's a decent corner and the defenders struggle to really hold him back and block his run in from the edge of the box, he's probably going to leap up and manage to header the ball into the goal. It seems quite simple, but it's actually easier for our attacking centre-back to run forwards towards the in-swinging corner with momentum behind him because he's running, generate more momentum on his jump and header the in-swinging corner towards goal than it is for the defending side, particularly when the defensive side also have your players in the area, in the 6-yard area, penalty spot area to deal with as well. And that's really it for our corner approach. Hopefully that made sense. I'll admit set pieces aren't really my strong point, but you'll have probably seen some throw-in and corner goals in our series intro, and really it's just that kind of Pulis-esque in-swinging corner style that I'm trying to recreate. Obviously, no idea how well this set piece will do or not. I think, generally speaking, set pieces, corners in Football Manager, as long as the fundamentals are decent and you've got half decent corner kick takers, then you will get goals every season from them. So it'll be really, really interesting, I think, especially with players like Shane Duffy, Tom Ahmed in our side, to see how many goals we actually manage from corners, how successful this corner approach ends up being. And obviously, if we go a few games without really scoring from set pieces, like if we're about 5, 6, 7 games into the season and we've not really scored from a corner, then we will come back and look at it, right? So, yeah, because as well, at the same time, like I said, in real life, you get more variation on the set pieces. You can work on them in a lot more detail in training and whatnot. So for me, set pieces are a very watered down bit of FM, which doesn't really work in our favour, trying to create a Pulis type tactic that is so reliant on them. Okay, so next up we're talking throw-ins. Now for me, the long throw has always been underwhelming in Football Manager. I've never really had much success with them, and I'm not really expecting to have much success with them within this Brighton side. If we take a look at our potential throw-in takers, as we can see, other than really Bruno and Suttner, I wouldn't say Charlotto, Bong, and so on are Delap-like at throw-ins. I'm probably looking for someone more like Bruno on 16, and I don't think Bruno will end up being our starting right-back, as we'll see in a few minutes' time. So, yeah, obviously, long throws will be something the lads will have to train on. And there is obviously the flat throw PPM, which is kind of what you'd probably want to train your throw taker to do. But generally speaking, I always find it's good if you don't have that specialist throw-in taker, like your Rory Delap and whatnot, just to let your fullback be your throw-in taker. And obviously you can tell him to try and throw it as long as possible. And in our case, if you throw enough men forward, you have big enough players, you will be able to ask questions of the opposition defence from a throw-in. But I've got no idea what level of success we're going to have from these throw-ins. In January, chances are I'll probably look to try and sign someone who has the flat throw trait and a very good throw-in attribute. Obviously, another reason why a lot of the time the better people to take the throw-ins are the fullbacks is because, well, they're probably going to be running up and down the touchline anyways. Maybe not so much in this tactical approach, but they still kind of will remain in their area. So make sure that it's your left back taking a left throw-in, not your right back. Otherwise, again, he's got to run all the way back to the other side of the pitch. Seems obvious, but you'd be surprised in Football Manager. Some of the silly things people do and don't realise they're doing it because they don't watch games in extended or comprehensive and just put games on in key and then complain they lose all the time. So what are we going for? Obviously, we're going for the long option. Now, I have a player who's basically making himself a short option. Now, unlike what I said about corners, I feel like when it comes to throw-ins, it could potentially be useful to have a short option. So that's that. Left midfielder lurking outside the area. In this case, because the left back is probably going to be taking the long throw on the left-hand side, right back obviously stays back, but to make up for, obviously, in our corners, we had both fullbacks stay back. I've opted to have one of our defensive midfielders stay back instead. Now, obviously, it's up to you which defensive midfielder you have stay back. I'd probably go for the less physical one. This could be something you might look to vary from game to game, depending on your starting 11. And I don't know why I keep saying you might. I'm kind of used from the tactical analysis videos. It's going to be something I, throughout this save, might look to vary. And generally speaking, I think if you analyse throw-ins in Football Manager, you have a lot more detail in corners, which still is very watered down, versus throw-ins. Throw-ins, like, it's very difficult to really come up with a throw-in tactic of some sort or anything along them lines. So for that reason, I've just ended up putting one of our centre-backs towards the near post. Again, we'll give the goalkeeper and defenders something to worry about, and chances are he'll cut back inside. And if it's a poor throw, which we probably are going to see a fair bit of, given we don't really have any phenomenal throw-in takers, we've at least got a big centre-back who's good in the air, who might be able to at least head it backwards across goal. We might be able to win the second ball and so on. So that's it really for the throw-ins, whether it's the left-hand side or the right-hand side. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's very, very difficult. There aren't really any options, as you guys can see, to choose anything special for a throw-in, which kind of limits what we can and can't do. I think the closest we'll really get to try and replicate Rory Delap style throw-ins is just to try and sign someone with the bullet throw PPM with high throwing attributes. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to kind of pick what I would consider my strongest team at the moment, and in the process we'll take a look at some of the individual players. We won't take a look at the stats of all of our players, but if you think I'm maybe missing out on an important player or neglecting an important player, let me know in the comments below, and hopefully I'll get to see your comments and take them into account prior to starting pre-season. So in terms of our starting goalkeeper, now Matthew Ryan is on paper the slightly, well, this is a bit laggy. It's the beta, isn't it? Matthew Ryan, obviously slightly better goalkeeper than Tim Krul. My only issue I'd say with Matthew Ryan is I kind of like my goalkeepers to be a little bit taller, and his communication isn't really great, which is kind of disappointing. I think it's kind of an important attribute for the Premier League, in my opinion, but I'm not going to really rule Tim Krul out either. Sometimes you want an experienced man between the sticks, and as we can see, in terms of Tim Krul, bar his kicking and strength, in a way, I feel like he does have better goalkeeper attributes than his opposite number, and I'll show you what I mean. So if we now compare him to Matthew Ryan and take a look at the attributes, obviously, even though Matthew Ryan might win out in some areas, especially physically because he's younger, I kind of feel like aerial reach, communication, handling, kicking, reflexes, like these are all core goalkeeping attributes, which I think for a goalkeeper are more important than mental attributes and pace or stamina, or maybe not strength, but pace or stamina or acceleration, right? Tim Krul ain't going to be running down the wing. He's going to be kind of static in goal. So I think what I'll end up doing is really rotating the two goalkeepers and see who can keep the more clean sheets. And whoever impresses me the most will probably end up staking a claim for the #1 shirt. But talking about the #1 shirt, I'm going to pick Matthew Ryan for now, because chances are we're probably going to start the first game of the season with him in goal. Next up, as we can see, we have quite a large selection of right backs. Now, in terms of trying to recreate a Pulis-esque style tactic, you probably want more of a centre-back converted to right-back type of player. We're not really going to be looking for him to get forward and cross the ball in too much. That's the winger in front of him's job. But because we don't have transfers on, we have to deal with what we have, basically. So, Shelotto and... this is a really annoying bug, by the way, in the beta. And Rosenoir are probably our better two right-backs. Whilst Bruno, even though he's very experienced, very good mentally, was a beast in the Championship, I feel like for the Premier League, he's far too slow. And even though, yes, I say we kind of want centre-back converted to right-back types of full-backs, they still need to be relatively fast enough to deal with pacey wingers. Now, if you come up against a pacey winger of like 16, 17 pace, obviously, your centre-back will struggle to keep up with him, or a centre-back style full-back will struggle to keep up with him, because chances are his physicals are going to be slightly less. But because it isn't going to be the style of full-back that's going to be running up and down the wing, chances are when he comes up against a tired full-back, will actually defensively be okay. But in terms of me choosing my starting right-back, it is actually going to be Shelotto. He looks like a very decent player, good physically. You know, we talk about a centre-back style full-back because of what he can bring to the table aerially. Yes, 11 heading is poor, but in terms of 14 jumping reach, 14 strength, and 15 balance, and 187 centimeters tall, I think he's a decent option. And 16 work rate as well. Wish his tackling was a little bit better. Crossing is pretty decent as well, so when he gets the opportunity to cross from deep, he probably will be pretty good at doing that as well. But generally speaking, he's the better right back at the club. So for that reason, he's going to be my starting right back. And the good thing about Charlotto as well is obviously in this kind of tactic where we're looking to counter-attack, we want a right-footed winger on the right-hand side and a left-footed winger on the left-hand side because they can hug the byline and just utilise their pace really and then whip the ball in. So the good thing about Charlotto is he is right-footed, so he can also play in the right winger role should we require him to as well. Because we have like Bruno and Rosenoir as well, we do have backup right backs should we require to utilise them. Next up we have our two centre backs. Now for me it's a bit of a no-brainer. Shane Duffy, yeah, regardless of how much of a sour taste he kind of left in the mouths of many Blackburn Rovers fans, including myself, I think I've got to admit that for me he is the best centre back at the club at the moment. Obviously physically a joy. 193 centimetres, this guy is an absolute giant, and it's kind of a no-brainer to have this guy on the pitch. We kind of have to. 16 strength, 17 jumping reach, his height, 16 heading, 16 tackling, and I'm focusing mainly on the heading and strength and jumping attributes, which means that this guy is going to be incredibly important for us from set pieces. Next up, we have two, in my opinion, secondary potential centre-backs, maybe even three. Hunemeyer, maybe not as good as his other equivalents, but what he gives you is experience. He's not that great physically, but he's pretty good technically with 15 tackling, 15 marking, 15 heading. So without a shadow of a doubt, a decent option on the bench. I wish it would stop doing that. So really, for me, it's always just going to be a bit of a battle between Connor Goldson and Lewis Dunk for that second defensive place. And if I had to probably choose between the two, I'd probably start off with Lewis Dunk. But again, it's going to be one of them kind of scenarios or cases where I'll end up choosing the player simply based on his form. And I think I probably just about favour Lewis Dunk, who seems like a slightly better player in some areas as well. But generally speaking, both at 191 centimetres, both relatively good in the air. I think Lewis Dunk has 16 jumping reach, which is just slightly better than Connor Goldson's 15 jumping reach. But they should both be pretty decent threats in the air, which is really what we're looking for in this kind of tactical approach. So we'll go with Lewis Dunk for now. And this is a cool thing that was available in FM17, but not a lot of people kind of knew about it, where if you hover over a centre-back, it tells you whether he prefers to be on the right or left-hand side of a two-man pairing. And if you have a three-at-the-back formation as well, some players might prefer to be in the centre and whatnot. Obviously, naturally, you'd put the right footer on the right and the left footer on the left, but in our case, all our centre-backs are kind of right-footed. So, fortunately for us, Lewis Dunk does actually prefer being on the left. So, next up is left back, and again, kind of a very similar situation to right back. We don't really have that kind of Wilkinson-style centre-back who can also play left-back style player. So, it's going to be pushed pretty tight between Gaëtan Bong, Cameroonian, and Marcus Suttner. Now, on paper, probably want to go with a slightly better option physically. That is Bong. I think Bong just has more about him than Suttner does, and we can compare the two players as well. So as we can see, even though from a physical standpoint, Suttner is probably a slightly better player, 15 free kick taking, 15 crossing, 13 corners, 12 passing and whatnot, as well as 15 long throws. Physically, Bong is a slightly better player, and I do really feel like them physical, 16 acceleration, 16 pace and whatnot, could end up being quite, and jumping reach and strength, which we've discussed earlier, could end up being a decisive factor given how we want to play the game. We're going to be defending deeper than, you know, your average side, so pace is less important, and it's more important that whoever's playing left back is better in the air and better at heading the ball, which Bong most certainly is. In terms of wanting to have most of our players above 6 foot as well, Suttner is a little bit on the short side, whilst Bong is roughly my height. So, yeah, above 6 foot, or just about 6 foot, which should hopefully, along with his slightly better heading stats, along with his slightly better jumping reach, make him a bit more of a better option from set pieces as well. But obviously, should one of them play a little bit poorly, we can always swap the other one out. And it's good that Chris Hughton in real life has kind of built a team that has quite a few rotation options, so credit where it's due to him. Next up, we're going to basically be talking about our central midfielders. Now, as you guys probably saw there, Bayram Kayal, who, ex-Celtic man, very, very good player, big fan of him as well. I enjoy watching him play. Box-to-box midfielder, really. Can pretty much, or carrilero, as the new role. I'm going to be honest, I've got no idea what that role even is. Like I said, I've not played much FM18 yet. So, yeah, I'm not going to really go into any details about it because I can't. But generally speaking, 16 stamina, 13 strength, 14 pace, 16 work rate, 15 tackling, 13 passing. Very, very good player is Bayram Kayal, but he is out for 3 to 4 months. So for that reason, it's going to be the championship wonder that is Dale Stephens to be partnering Pascal Grosse, I think is how you pronounce it, in the middle of the park. And yeah, realistically speaking, there probably are two better central midfielder players. If you're going to look at any other central midfielders, you've got Davy Proper, who's lurking around. But for me, he's probably more of a playmaker style player. I feel like Dale Stephens probably has just a little bit more than Proper does all around the block, whilst Proper's maybe a little bit better from a technical standpoint. But again, obviously, Proper, brand new signing for Brighton in real life. Important player for them. And if Stephens doesn't perform, he will obviously get dropped for Proper. So yeah, and Pascal Gross, this guy's been doing really, really well in real life, getting assists for days for Brighton in real life, doing very well in fantasy football. Very good technically, as you'd expect from a German player. 15 passing. His tackling and work rate... his work rate is pretty good, but his tackling could be better. And it could be a little bit stronger as well with better jumping reach. So maybe when we play the big sides, we might end up, once Kayal is back, play Kayal alongside Stephens in midfield, which would probably give us a little bit more legwork. But you've got to make do with what you've got. So I'd say Stephens and Gross at the moment, in my opinion, are our strongest duo in terms of trying to match up a well-balanced pairing in midfield. But again, Davy Proper is also a decent technical option. Maybe against poorer sides like your Swanseas, like your Burnleys, like your other teams that got promoted, like your Huddersfields, it might make more sense to play Proper over Stephens, who does give you that little bit of extra technical ability to try and find that unlocked pass to, launch a counter-attack from. So, generally speaking, I won't look too much into our pairing in midfield, but in terms of our strongest pairing, I'd say it's Grosse and Kayal, but Kayal is currently injured. Okay, so next up we've got our two wingers. Now, on paper, you'd probably straight away think, Anthony Knockout, or is he out for 3 to 6 weeks? Really? Okay. So you probably think, strongest right winger is Anthony Knockout. But one thing I emphasised earlier on is we want a right footer on the right-hand side and a left footer on the left-hand side. So even though Anthony Knockout prefers playing on the right-hand side, where obviously he wants to cut in as an inside forward, I'd rather actually play him on the left-hand side. Simply because I'm not that bothered about him cutting inside, because I don't want him to overflow the middle of the park. We've already got our two main strikers. What I want, all his job is to whip the ball in for the two strikers. For me, that's where the majority of our goals are going to be coming from. And naturally, he will pick up goals as well. But I don't want him doing anything too fancy. Probably will have to train him up a little bit better on this left-hand side. If we can get that slightly more green, I'll be relatively happy. But Anthony Knockout, massive fan of this guy. Fun fact, I met him once at Leicester train station. I think it was just before he went to Belgium on loan. Yeah, standard, he was going to London St. Pancras. But yeah, anyways, that to one side. Quality player, class player. Not quite sure how he'll do in the Premier League, but he does have some nice attributes. And the fact that he's valued at almost 20 million quid does say a lot about him. So he's going to be our main player out on the left. Good thing about him as well is he can play up front should we require him to do so. Now next up, we've dealt with the left wing. It's time to discuss who's going to be playing out on the right wing, and it's going to be Solly March. And those of you guys that know Brighton pretty well will kind of be like, well, you're a bit of a hypocrite, aren't you? You don't want to play Knockout on the right hand side because he's left footed. Yeah, so is Solly March because you want a right footed winger. Now the only other main right footed wingers we have are Charlotto, who for me at the moment I want kind of playing right back. That could change. Or Jamie Murphy, as far as I'm aware. And for me, Jamie Murphy for this league isn't quite physical enough. Now, the reason why I've opted to go with Solly March on the right-hand side is because Kanaka has the avoids using weaker foot trait, but also has the runs with ball often trait. So for me, it just seems like playing him on the right-hand side means I won't get him running the byline much and even attempting to whip the ball in with his weaker foot. Or the probability of that happening is a lot less than Solly March, who, in comparison, runs with ball often. Now, he does cut inside from the right wing, but I don't really mind that too much because it gives us a little bit of an extra dimension, right? Ideal? No, not really. Not exactly what we're looking for. But, you know, in this scenario where I've got to choose between a compromise, I feel like this is my best compromise at the moment. Now, next up, we've got our two strikers. On paper, you probably think Tom Hamed comes across as a bit of a better target man, but no, we're actually going to go with Glenn Murray as our main target man. Reason being, Tom Hamed has a better work rate than Glenn Murray, and I do kind of feel like that suits the defensive forward position a little bit better and has slightly better off the ball movements and whatnot. If you compare heading and jumping reach as well, Glenn Murray has 15 jumping reach and 15 heading, which is slightly better, I think, than Hamed's 16 heading, but 13 jumping reach, given they're both the same height as well. So I do feel like Hamed as a defensive forward with Murray as the target man is a slightly better combination than having him on bright green and him on yellow, if that makes sense. But generally speaking, if it looks like, you know, we're struggling to whip the ball in towards our target man, bloody hell, this UI, man, and we're struggling, we can always swap our wingers around and we can always swap our strikers around. So in terms of what I consider my strongest starting 11 at the moment, that is probably it. Let me know if you think I've made some incorrect decisions here in the comments below. And obviously, in terms of subs and stuff, I'm not really going to go through who we've really got for subs. Steve Sidwell is a very experienced player. Not really sure whether he still has it in him to play in the Premier League, to be fully honest, but he'll be a useless squad player. And that's about it, really. So, yeah. Hopefully, once I edit this video, it won't end up being 40 minutes long, even though, again, I think it's going to end up being longer than I thought it was. But hopefully, videos will start to get shorter now that we've kind of blown all the important gaff out the way in the last 2 episodes. So it was never going to be easy. It was never going to be a simple approach, either to try and play like Pulis, but hopefully, we might not be too far away from it. And I guess I'll see you guys next time after I've played all of our pre-season games. So if you like the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Really looking forward to actually playing some Football Manager 2018, as in like actually playing the game and watching games and managing games rather than doing all this mumbo jumbo. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if I haven't already said so. I probably have done a gazillion times. It helps me out a lot. Leave a comment below if you think, you know, I've made a wrong decision somewhere in terms of my player selection. And as always, thanks for watching.